My name is Daniel Duran. I am an Orange County resident, born and raised. Growing up and attending public high schools in Orange County, I was taught a version of its history that felt sugar-coated and brief. Much of it focused on the admiration and pride for Orange County, romanticizing its settlers and those who founded it, describing the area as having grown from farmland into rich and diverse cities. But when I did my own research, I found a very different history. I learned that Orange County had a significant Ku Klux Klan presence. To give a brief history background on the Ku Klux Klan, they had three major rises. The first after the Civil War, when many Southerners were angry that slavery had ended and wanted to preserve the old system. They violently opposed people of different races and religions. Although they were predominantly Protestant Christians, their main goal was the spread of white supremacy. Orange County became home to the Klan's second rise during the 1920s and 30s. Orange County's Klan leadership was made up of stable, successful, middle-class people who had strong and lasting involvement in local civic affairs. In Brea, 5 out of its first 8 mayors were Klan members from 1924 to 1936. 6 out of the 10 councilmen were Klan members. 50% of the city treasurers, 25% of the city engineers, 50% of the city clerks, 50% of the city marshals, and even 67% of the fire chiefs were also Klan members. In Fullerton, 7 out of 10 councilmen from 1918 to 1913 were Klan members. Anaheim was the hub of the Klan in Orange County. It was even advertised nationally as a model Klan city. In fact, Anaheim hosted the largest gathering in California of Klan members, with over 20,000 members across the state coming together to initiate about 1,000 new members here in Orange County. Fullerton also had a smaller meeting of 5,000 people at Amherst Park. The one in Anaheim was Anaheim City Park. These examples show just how much power the Klan had and how responsible it was for the racism and racial segregation in the county. One example comes from Baxter and Bernice Young, a black American couple who lived in Orange County for 70 years. They began living there around 1920s and had to experience the rise of the Klan and the racial segregation that came with it. The exclusion of black Americans in Orange County became very clear in their story. When they arrived, there were fewer than 20 black families in the area. Baxter was only one of 2 black students attending Santa Ana High School in 1929. He was bullied and got into fights almost every day because of his race and skin color. He also explained how difficult it was for black residents to find jobs because, as he put it, quote unquote, those people did not want you doing or working around them. Referring to the white people, Bernice Young worked as a cleaning woman. One day while cleaning one of her employer's desks, she found KKK recruitment literature pamphlet. Her employer worked in real estate, which again shows the Klan's influence that affected those who were welcomed and those who were not welcomed in Orange County. Which is, again, Orange County was not inclusive of black Americans. By the 1950s, Baxter explained that the rise of the civil rights movement actually made conditions worse in Orange County, with more police harassment of black residents. Earlier I mentioned that in places like Brea and Anaheim, many public officials were Klan members. Even in the 1950s, it was possible that some of that influence remained. Their story was published in 1991. At the end of the article, the Youngs said that they felt like Orange County was a racist county still, a Klan county. They felt things had not truly improved. That is deeply sad and concerning, especially because this was said in 1991, over 30 years ago. Another account comes from Luis Olivos, a Mexican-American man who opened the first Mexican-owned theater and the first non-segregated theater that welcomed people of all races. Lewis grew up in Santa Ana during the 1920s and faced a great deal of discrimination because of his Mexican heritage. Policies and practices at the time treated ethnic Mexicans like second-class citizens, which made it easier for the state and society to exploit them. This discrimination took the form of racial segregation. Mexicans were forced to live in barrios, areas set aside for them to live in, go to school, shop, and build communities in. This system was closely tied to Orange County's citrus industry. Orange County had a two-track school system that reflected the values of society dependent on agricultural labor. Mexican children were not segregated in order to help educate or integrate them into white society. Instead, they were given an education designed to prepare them for manual labor. They were denied better educational opportunities because better education could lead to better jobs and better housing, of course, which would have challenged the racial hierarchy of the time. So again, we see the segregation of Mexican Americans. Lewis was among the first Mexican American children to overcome these barriers. By graduating from Santa Ana's segregated school system with a high school diploma. His later success, including owning his own non-segregated theater, opened doors for greater inclusion of all races. However, Orange County did not fully accept that success. When Lewis earned enough money to move out of the barrios and into a nicer neighborhood with mostly a greater white population, he faced backlash. People did not like him moving there. He described how his son, while walking to school one morning, he saw a cross that had been burning on a lawn in the neighborhood the night before. It just goes to show that this story presents how the Klan was still even relevant to that up into the 50s, right? Even though it wasn't openly named in the article. This is why I feel so, as I said, it wasn't really mentioned in the article. Briefly mentioned in both articles, the Klan. But this is why I feel strongly about history and why I believe it's important to learn it and to remember it. Ignoring or erasing history only makes it easier for the evils of the past to return and hide in plain sight. If people don't know history, they may not recognize those same patterns when they appear again in the present. They have no reference. For example, the Holocaust in Germany is heavily taught in schools. Germany does not want its people to forget that atrocity, and it does not want Nazism to rise again. I believe Orange County should approach its Klan history in a similar way. We should not want the Klan or its values to return, and I worry that some of that presence may still exist. There may still be Klan influence in Orange County, whether socially or even politically. In 2015, residents in Whittier and Fullerton woke up to flyers on their lawns. CBS Los Angeles called the number listed on the flyer, and it belonged to a modern-day Klan member from the South Carolina charter named Aaron. He denied being directly responsible for distributing the flyers, but he supported whoever had done it, and he also took the opportunity to spread racist ideas and propaganda. And this made me think that there still may be a Klan presence in Orange County. He may have been lying about his involvement. Historically, especially during the Klan's second rise in Orange County, the group often operated in a more secretive way. So it would make sense for someone to deny responsibility while still supporting the message. This reminds me again of Bernice Young's finding the KKK recruitment pamphlets earlier years or decades ago. That history still feels relevant today, Now, I want to look at some statistics that reminded me of these stories. These charts come from the United States Census Bureau and use 2024 data, which was the most recent data I could find on this. The first chart shows the estimated population of Orange County by race, along with the poverty rates. White residents make up the largest population and group and have the lowest poverty rate. Hispanics make up the second largest group population, but they have one of the highest poverty rates in the groups. For two groups with relatively close population sizes, the white and Hispanics, that difference is striking. I also want to focus mainly on the black or African residents because this data reflects Baxter and Bernice Young's experience of exclusion in Orange County. During the era they lived through, black residents made up a very small part of the population because of the racial exclusion and segregation. Even today, black residents still make up a small percentage of Orange County's population, estimated to be around 50,000 in 2024. They also have the highest poverty rate at 16.1%. To me, this raises serious concerns about how exclusion may still affect black communities in Orange County today. The next chart shows educational attainment. And I believe it reflects what I learned from Luis Olivo's story about segregation and discrimination. In one case, we saw the exclusion of black Americans. In this case, we see the limited inclusion of Mexican Americans. You may ask how inclusion may be racist. The answer is that Mexican labor was welcomed only when it served the citrus industry. Mexican communities were allowed to grow, but under conditions where people were underpaid, segregated, and denied equal opportunities. This chart shows that white residents have the highest high school graduation rate, 97.5%. Black residents are at 93.5%, which is fairly high. But here I want to focus on Hispanic or Latino residents, whose graduation rate is at 71.3%, the lowest among the groups shown. That is concerning. To me, it suggests that the effects of past inequality may still be present today. Present-day data seems to mirror patterns we see in historical accounts. So what should be done? I believe Orange County history should be taught more honestly and more fully in depth in schools to help prevent this kind of history from repeating itself. This is why I advocate for better education. The question is, when should students learn this history? It is a serious and mature topic, so that could be difficult to answer. We don't want to introduce it in a way that is harmful or overwhelming to very young children. But at the same time, students need to learn it somewhere. Junior high may be a good place for a basic introduction, followed by a more in-depth instruction in high school. There could be a lesson, a unit, a whole week dedicated to learning about this history. While doing my research, it was difficult to find enough present-day data and information to fully understand whether these patterns are continuing. That is another reason I believe this education matters so much. I cannot investigate this alone. I do not have every skill needed to fully analyze the data or tell the whole story by myself. That is why we need better education in places like Fullerton and throughout Orange County. Some may argue against this idea. Earlier I mentioned Germany and the Holocaust and the heavy education they get about it in Germany. One point raised in the article I read was that some Germans feel fatigue from being reminded of that history so often. Some people may worry the same thing could happen here, that people will become tired of the topic, annoyed by it, or resentful. But I like to argue that this education is necessary, and if you ask many Germans, they will likely say that they are ashamed of such history and do not want it to happen again. That That is because they are taught both the good and bad parts of their history. And that is exactly why it is important for us to know all of our history here in Orange County. Thank you so much.